pastor. She remains at that church and is currently serving as a children's Sunday school teacher and director of the children's church, which is her passion. She is an ordained deacon and elder of the Christian Methodist CME Church. Professionally, Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver is a contract therapist at HLH Consultants, an agency who works with clients who are referred from the Department of Children and Family Services. And then personally, Pastor Tolliver is one of my former pastors, and I give her credit for my work as an educator. She was the reason why one of our churches actually had a discipleship ministry for our children, and I had the privilege of being one of the Sunday teachers in that discipleship ministry. She also just serves as one of my favorite ministers, and so I am really excited that everyone gets to hear her speak this morning. So without further ado, I welcome Reverend Dr. Tolliver to the stage.
Well, good morning. And I have to tell you that I'm calling you at least one of my spiritual granddaughters. You got it? All right, can you all hear me? Can you hear me now? All righty. Well, wonderful. As a retired clergy, and I brought the message last week also, I do have a text for you guys. So, and this scripture came to me in my later years, not while I was going through the process of going to school, but it came to me in one of my later years as I was growing older. And but before I give that, I have to say, I see some young people out there. Hi! As Elise told me, it told you all, I love working with young people. So I get a chance to work with children, youth, and young adults. That is my passion. I'm a part of Child Evangelism Fellowship, and that's a worldwide ministry for children. So I love young people. I love y'all. And so Joshua 1:9, Joshua 1:9 is the scripture that I have for you. I'm not going to preach it. I'm just going to say it, all right? Have I not commanded you? And this is in the New International Version. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And that's the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. And the people of the Lord say, thanks be to God. Amen. So again, I want to thank Reverend Nathan Kilburn, who I met just briefly. I don't know if he's back yet from his visit. The pastor of this church, senior pastor, and to those other pastors that I met just recently, again to Miss Elise Hampton, one of my spiritual granddaughters, and to the Church and Society Committee for inviting me to speak today. What a blessing that is. And I want you all to meet my sister, Judge Kathleen Bell, retired judge who still works every day as a judge or every day she wants to, I should say, as a judge or mediator in the state of Arkansas. I'm so glad that she decided to travel with me. And thank you to those of you who have already introduced yourselves to me. I'm going to jump right into the presentation. I understand that someone is operating the system, and so I'm going to move to the next slide. I won't always say move to the next slide because that's kind of like choppy, right? But I do want you to know I'm getting into it now. So One of the things that I want you to know is that my sister and I desegregated two schools. We'll talk about that. I will. I'm not going to put her on the spot today. But one of the things that I did was to write a book, and it's up there for you to view if you want. And the way that I did it was through the use of oral history, where I got a chance to interview people. I'll touch on that in just a little bit. But the reason that I did that when writing about history, which is not my profession, I'm a family therapist, an individual therapist, and the other side, as Elise already told you, is in the clergy. So, but the reason I chose to do this is to be able to understand uh, things about the desegregation process from people whose voices had not previously been heard, and to empower those voices of people who participated in the historical events to be heard, and then to dispel the myths around some of the dominant truths. I was very curious myself also about the process. And that term, kujichagulia, is one of the terms of Kwanzaa. I don't know if you all know about Kwanzaa here, but I'm sure that somebody has mentioned that to you. But that's one of the 7 principles. And this one is my absolute favorite principle. And that term is, again, is kujichagulia. It's Kiswahili. And you can see what it means there to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined by, created by, spoken for by other people about us. And so I wanted to do that because many people had talked about the process of desegregation, but then it kind of got shelved, or they only spoke about the Little Rock Nine, who I applaud totally. But what about the rest of us? And I'm still, Mr. JD, thinking about writing about the elementary children and having their voices heard. So I'm thinking about that. So, at any reason, I wanted to know some questions, and the primary questions that I will highlight for you is that first one. The first 3 are the ones that I will highlight. You'll see perhaps some others there as well. But what was the reason the entire school district was not being simultaneously desegregated? Little Rock School District is what I'm talking about. By the way, as some of you know, every school district in Arkansas was desegregated at some point, and some a lot earlier than Little Rock Public Schools. As you look at your history, you'll know Northwest Arkansas was among the first to do that. And finances were the primary reason. They were busing black children from all the way in the Fayetteville area and maybe even beyond to Fort Smith. Well, that was a little costly for 1 or 2 families that had not been run out of that area before. So they started, and then a few other schools started. But what was the method of implementing desegregation of the junior high schools in 1961? And how did the students' parents and other important figures prepare? Everybody say prepare, because we're going to talk about that as we talk about recommendations later on. Prepare them to desegregate the schools. Were they given the opportunity to make a decision about whether to attend that school. So now that was key for me as I was thinking about how the world did I wind up where I went. So, but there are some other guiding questions that, and I'll just kind of let you all look at those. And especially at that number 5 about the influence, lasting influence on the lives of many people. As I was preparing for this, I started to kind of grieve because several of the people I interviewed have now passed away. So I'm very thankful that I got a chance to interview people. And if I tear up, it's only because I know they're already gone, but their story lives on. So now the next one is, what was the reason the entire school district was not simultaneously desegregated? So you'll notice that was one of my key ones that I wanted to answer. And so that had to do with the fact that we in Arkansas interpreted how to desegregate sort of a little bit differently than other states did. So each state did something a little bit differently when they were kind of forced, I guess, encouraged is a nice reframe of that, to desegregate. And so, but you can see that Supreme Court statement. I'm just highlighting one part of it. Segregation of itself deprives Negro children of equal opportunities. That's the reason Brown versus Board of Education, or Board of Topeka, really kind of launched this very new thing. And they also indicated that they call it integration. I used the word desegregation. There was never really an integration that occurred. Should occur with all deliberate speed. How many of you out there are language people, and you think about, what do these words mean? What's the meaning of that? I see a few hands. Yes. And so that is something that's very critical as we look at that. The next slide helps us to understand there was still a delay in the desegregation process, especially in Arkansas. It was not happening. Let me put it that way. And so in 1955, there was another court order. And then the Supreme Court justice ultimately left it pretty much in the hands, the decision as to how swiftly or all deliberate speed was going to take place. In other words, what is that going to mean? And so he left it in the hands of the state to decide how deliberate, how swiftly that was going to take place. And their rationale was that some school districts could do it pretty swiftly because their schools their population was small in that area. They could get it up and going very quickly, and others were a little bit more cumbersome. So they left it up to the lower courts to decide how deliberate, how swift things were going to happen. Do you think that happened easily for people? Absolutely, you're right. She's going. All right, so when we think about that, it takes us to the first attempt. There was a lawsuit. Law kind of pretty much drives many movements. And so there was a lawsuit. The Aaron, who was the first name of the person, this group of people, 27 people that filed the lawsuit, versus Cooper, who was William G. Cooper, the president of the Little Rock School Board. And so the lawsuit was filed to allow 27 African American children to enter the schools at all different levels. And that was 1956. So they were turned away. They said, oh no, the school board said this is not going to happen. The courts filed suit against the Little Rock School District, therefore, against the president. This was the lawsuit that was filed, in other words, and the secretary of the board of directors of the Little Rock School District. And ultimately, the lawsuit failed. They said they were going to launch a plan. And that word, that plan, the Arkansas plan, really became one of the mainstays that guided everything that was going to take place. So Judge Miller ruled that the plan in 1956 was appropriate, that plan of desegregation. And he decided that it was going to bring about an effective, get these words, and gradual. It's almost like an oxymoron, right? An effective and gradual plan of adjustment for the state, for the Little Rock School District, so that things would not become too disruptive. And so they decided to build additional high schools and junior high schools as they erected their plan. Now you must understand that several things about that. So as they were building these schools, they were building pretty much a black high school, which is now called Horace Mann, and they were building a white high school, which is called Hall High School, to go along with their high schools. So they had other schools that were in mind also, but those were the two primary ones that they would look at. Now, Horace Mann was not going to be desegregated. That was not part of the plan. So they built these schools, and Central High began the process of desegregation in 1957. You all know that history, so I don't have to share that part of it with you, except for everyone in here who's ever heard of the Little Rock Nine. Raise your hand. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So those were the ones that would go to this white school. Now, nobody said the Dunbar Nine. Dunbar at the time was, it had been a junior college, and it had been a high school, and then they made Horace Mann a high school, so then they lowered Dunbar to a junior high school status. And so they wanted to have desegregation to begin gradually with the high schools, and that's what they did. And they wanted, number three, which is crucial, to wait on a proper time and method for the integration of the schools of Little Rock in a manner consistent with the law as interpreted by the Supreme Court and acceptable to both races. I don't quite think they got to the acceptable to both races. Kathleen, do you? I knew she was going to say that. All right. So 1957 took place. 1957 resulted in riots, right? And 1957 ultimately resulted in the governor closing the schools for 1958 and 1959. Just basically, uh, the other part to that is it caused the second phase of desegregation to fail because the governor determined that since he closed the schools, and I don't know where my picture is that I kept of the government being closed, but I didn't bring that one today, but some of you can find that picture. But it says that the high schools were closed that year. And so since that part of desegregation failed, then they would not be able to move with phase two or phase three. They had a plan that you can see in that desegregation part to move from phase one to phase two to phase three, but it did not work. And so it did not allow the desegregation process to slowly continue for the period of, well, maybe it did. It says a minimum of 10 years. So, but at any rate, it didn't work since he closed the school district, the Little Rock, the high schools in that 58, 59 year. And so the next step was that those defendants that were in that part of the lawsuit were then enjoined from impeding the process of desegregation. A lawsuit occurred, and so they were not allowed to close the school district again, the high schools. But just think of how disruptive that was for all the students who were in those schools. There was, in that same Act 4 of the second extraordinary session, I want you all to hear me carefully. The governor proposed that the funds would be removed from the public schools and allow students to attend private schools, charter schools, and other schools to be able to continue their school district. It was proposed way back there in that 1960 process, 1958, 59, 60. So when you think about what's going on now, it started way back then in the extraordinary session. Did you all know that? Some of you did. Most people did not. But I'm not going to say anything else about that. Social justice will come and put a zipper on my mouth. But at any rate, I did want you to be aware of that. But the schools reopened for the 59 and 60 process, and the Court of Appeals ordered that the plan of desegregation be reinstated effective immediately. And they had some harsh words for the governor, Faubus, and the legislature at that time. They could not stop the progress from moving forward, the process from moving forward. So there were 39 in 1960, by the way, this is just very brief, who tried to desegregate in 1960. They were not allowed to desegregate because progress had not been made sufficiently. And so the first year of desegregation of the junior high schools was in 1961. But let me go to the pupil assignment law. You see that of 1959. There were criteria that were outlined for the assignment, reassignment, appeals, and qualifications of people who would be attending the various schools. Race could not be used, which is kind of hard because they were moving black people to white schools. But how they did it, I don't know. They came and got me. So, but race could not be used. And so they had 16 criteria. I'm going to, hopefully, you're able to see some of those, but I'm going to highlight just a few of those. And I only listed 6 of the 16 that were here. So the suitability of established, that's number 4, curricula for particular pupils, the adequacy of the pupils' academic preparation for admission. I mean, are you qualified to be able to attend this school? And the scholastic aptitude and intelligence. And, well, you read into it what you want. So then, and you'll see this if you want to look at some of these things as you prepare to leave today, you'll see that there is an article I blew up. I have to tell you, when I saw this as I was doing my research, and we had to use those old finders, look through the tube. I don't even remember what it's called now, but at any rate, when I saw that they had put our names, our addresses, and all of that in the newspaper, what do you think I did? I started crying because they put all of those for the 25 students that were identified as going to those schools in there. And what do you think that might do to some of the parents? Scare them totally. In fact, it caused at least one not to attend because their house was rocked. And there were threats and all kinds of things that went through those various areas. And so those 25 were identified, published in the newspaper, along with their contact information. No phone numbers as far as I know. But the next thing that we do know is that there was a determination, a decision to be made to have Little Rock be quiet in this desegregation process for the junior high school, which was totally different from the high school. I did not tell you, but I'll just say very briefly that in that 1958-59 year, there were many businesses that were lost because people from different states who were investing in Arkansas said, we don't want any parts of what you all are doing. If you're closing the schools, if you're not allowing the desegregation, we don't want any parts of it. It actually took a women's group to maybe talk to their husbands and began to do the process of helping them to understand this hurts our pocketbook. So maybe we better follow what the president is saying. So in that next year, there were many people who were ready for people around the world, because the high school situation made news around the world. So there were many people who were just invested in people seeing the schools be quiet in their desegregation process. So that word quiet was completely highlighted in the newspapers and around various parts. The fights that occurred didn't make the news at West Side east side, those areas around, but it was primarily at west side. But in in the process, you will notice, and I'm going back just a little bit to tell you that 25 people were assigned and two withdrew, and that was Felton Walker and Ida Butler. And Ida was assigned to attend Forest Heights, where I attended. My parents didn't know that until the first day of school. Apparently, we didn't really talk, so I think maybe that's when they discovered she wasn't going. I believe. I want to believe that. So when Felton and I talked, when I was attempting to get him to be interviewed, he told me he didn't go because his home was the one that was rocked. His grandmama said, "No, baby, we're not going to do this." So they withdrew. But Ida's mother took her before the school board because there was a process of appeals. And she said, "We didn't ask for this. We didn't want this. She doesn't have transportation for this. We request that she go to Dunbar," which is what was happily taken care of for her. So you can see that there were 9 students in East Side, there were 11 students at West Side, and there was 1 student at Forest Heights. At Southwest, there were 2 students for 1 year. I'll just tell you that because I'm going to skip through it. Will Burnett withdrew the second year because she couldn't take that. And she also had a few medical issues. But so Henry was there for the 8th and the 9th grade on his own. And there were fights there pretty much every day. But as we look at those students, you can see that those numbers were really big. And until I interviewed those people, I thought that they had it really nicely at the time because, my goodness, 11 students in one school, I did not know until the interviews that every single one was placed in a different classroom. So the only time they saw each other was lunch, which was huge for me. But the same thing occurred at East Side, and the same thing occurred at Southwest. The next year, my sister and one other person, Pinky Thompson, attended Pulaski House because there was no one who they identified or who was assigned to Pulaski Heights in 1961. So she also desegregated that particular school. Now, I'm going into the discovery zone, and I wanted to ask that first question of the students. How did the students' parents and other important figures, you see that word prepare again? Did you have a question? I got 4 minutes. Thank you. 4 minutes, yes, and I have fewer on my thing that I was going to do because I'm going to give you questions. But anyway, how were they prepared? And so when I look at the preparation process, whose decision was it? The students said 8 of them said they made the decision to desegregate. Now, I want to offer the correct impression on this one. They might have decided, but the school board really made the final decision as to who was going to go. And some people applied and they did not get the opportunity to attend. But this is the way they thought it took place. And one student didn't know who made the decision. And I think Kathleen and I would have tied for that one. because we didn't know how that happened. But this last two that I want to share with you is that the preparation part was very, very important for the students. I loved what Pinky, who recently passed away, said. We had almost daily discussions about what happened and what we could have done in those situations that were challenging for her. Um, and I'm going to skip down, so I know I'm going to confuse the person as I'm skipping. I'm going to the supportive behaviors, and then I'm going to go lastly to the recommendations. So, as you can see, those supportive behaviors that occurred in the classroom. Uh, Kenneth was saying to us that I remember the French teacher, and she just wanted students to excel, and he went into honors English. And Joyce also, Judge Warren, I believe Mr. J.D. knows her. I'm going to take my last 2 minutes. I said it for 35 so that I wouldn't be totally out of time. Uh, Judge Warren said, I found where our homeroom was, and she was walking up and down, couldn't decide if she was going to go in. And her teacher came out and said, it's time to come in. She remembered that supportive process. And the janitors, you see, from the top to the bottom, anybody could be a support. The janitors were her saving people. But there were also people who were racist throughout their time. And I can go into that, but I'm not going to go into that today. But those people who really stood out were those who were supportive and who offered not a friendship, but an equal opportunity for the students to succeed. The students also loved their elementary school and the compassion they got because their elementary schools were all black at the time. And they believed that they were almost pushed, encouraged to achieve. And some of them in the presentation discovered that in their schools, many people did not care whether they succeeded or whether they failed. They weren't going to go an extra mile. So as I'm closing today, I want you to know on my slide where it says academic achievement, 15 graduated from Central High School. I graduated from Hall, and I thought I had almost gone to heaven because there were black people in that school. I still wasn't in any classes with them, but there were 5 of us in the senior class, and that was much better than 1. I was a class of 1 until the 9th grade when 2 people came, and they were in the 7th grade. But most of them graduated from Central High School, and they recall many experiences there that, you know, changed them and set them up for life. I wanted to give the recommendations for parents, for educators. I'm going to just ask, yes, the slide is right there. But for parents, build secure relationships with your child, with your grandchildren, with your nieces, with your whoever it is that you have responsibility, even on the outer fringe, to do. Fully prepare the child for any change they may experience. They need communication, and that really helps them as they're making decisions. Ground the child in faith, and as I can say here, in the Lord, and in the values that undergird that. And I'm going to skip down to the churches, the neighbors' churches and community. And you see that this is what you all can do. I see that you're doing it because you have young people here. That active engagement and involvement in the child's life, all kinds of support can be there through the youth groups, through the tutoring, through prevention, intervention classes. They need all of that. And they need to know that you're hearing, that you are carefully taking in the information they're sharing, or sometimes just through the body language they're sharing it, right? And so be there to provide that child with strong foundational values. They need to have that from you. They may not get it in too many other places, but I'm praying that they can count on you to give it to them. Thank you all very much for allowing me to be here today. If you have any questions, I think we still have a few minutes. Elise, you want to take over? Or Pastor, would you like to take over? Okay.
I never heard really much about desegregation. I always heard about integration. So, is there any difference in that based on the time of the country,
Yes.
or?
So when you hear the word integration, enter is the key word. And even when it was set up, you remember that it says a slow and gradual process. There was a lot of resistance. So desegregation meant that people were put into those schools against the wishes of many other people. They were put into those schools, and they may not have wanted them there. They showed it in different ways, and so just a few students were placed there. They weren't there to integrate. They just were there to follow the law so that the students would be able, as few students as possible at first, would be able to get in. Later years, a few more and then a whole bunch more came because of the additional laws that came about. But it was not a process of planning to integrate them into any of the academics that they could have been. Yes.
To that point, I grew up in Stuttgart, and we fully integrated when I was in the 8th grade. So until the 5th grade, we didn't even have freedom of choice. They were fully segregated until that time. But one of the things in your book that I found interesting was the extent of the preparation that took place among black students, meetings with churches and individuals and planning and talking. And in my own experience in my school, there was never any discussion in our school, in the white school, about preparation, about this is going to be happening, that there might be things that we could do to welcome students, or they're going to be afraid, and so we might want, there was nothing that took place. And I just wonder if that was an experience in others who experienced desegregation of schools, because I was really struck by how much work had to have been done and was done for black students, and there was nothing done from the white schools.
Did anyone else have a similar experience to Mr. JD? Go ahead.
There was no preparation for the white people that I knew of. Just all of a sudden there was a black fellow in our class, and that's the way it was.
And that could also, and I saw a few other hands, if some of you have a question about it, then I saw one hand. Did you also have a question? Okay, would you mind taking that to her?
Just answering a similar experience to JD, because I was at Asian schools north of you. But yeah, there was no preparation for the white kids
Okay,
as to what happened, except them telling us it's going to happen.
it's going to happen. So there were several organizations that were mentioned. Let me just highlight that. The NAACP being one, especially for those in the high schools, and then the Urban League came a little bit later, and then some of the organizations even had meetings, and they would talk with us about what was going on. The one thing that I recall missing out on was the fact that they didn't ask us any questions about how's it going, what's going on, how can we help you, or whatever, and that would have been very helpful. But they didn't have that piece, but they did have the meetings. I'm believing that the civil organizations, those men's groups and different kinds of things, I know they were talking about desegregation, but the lack of preparation was key. Maybe that's why some of the people were beating on us. I didn't get beaten. I got knocked down. I got spit on, all of those kinds of things. But there were several other things. I'm not asking my sister. But, but there were several other things that went on. Ma'am?
My son's uncle was actually bused to College Station Elementary in the 6th grade, which was a predominantly black school. And there was no preparation except, hey, you're going.
Yes.
We've selected you to be bused back over this way. And that was 88,
Yes, yes.
87, 88. There was still no, like, hey, fair warning, this might happen.
Right, and that's the Pulaski County Special School District, and their lawsuit just ended this year. From all of that time, just ended this year. And they haven't finished all the work, but they believe that it's going to be done. College Station is where I pastored, where I still work with Children's Church, and I worked with the schools. But as you're saying, that school area was and still remains almost completely black. There are a couple of white students that were going there. It's not there right this minute because it's being rebuilt, they promise, but I don't know.
I think that is our time for today, but let us give thanks and praise to Reverend Dr. Laverne Bell-Telfier. We are so grateful that you came to share with us today and to remind us that there's still work to be done in light of all of these stories that you've uplifted for us that we might not have heard before, and we appreciate that. Let us be reminded that there is another Fifth Sunday presentation coming up on May 31st. Our Affirming Ministries team will be hosting that discussion, and with that noted for church and society, let us turn to God in a word of prayer. Almighty God, we give you thanks for gathering us here. We give you thanks for sharing with us the voices of your people, the voices of your children. And we ask that you help us uplift those stories and experiences that we have heard, that they might be made new in our hearts and empower us as we live as your children. Lord, we know the work here is not done, and yet we have vowed to resist evil